people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News. Okay, we'll start with this. The latest set of updates to the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, as I specified in a previous video. This weekend's action would alter it. That Bam Rodriguez, with a big win, could move from number 9 up to number 8, ahead of Shakur S. Stevenson. And so, with the big knockout win, that's exactly what happened. He moves up to number 8. Shakur Stevenson moves down to number 9. But that's not all. Artur Beterbiev, unified light heavyweight champion who was previously ranked at number 10, falls off the list. And he falls off the list due to inactivity. That this is an injury-prone fighter that fights so infrequently, it's hard to give him a spot ahead of someone who's also accomplished, but also more active, like Junto Nakatani. 3-division champion Junto Nakatani. He now ranks in at number 10. He's going to be in action very soon in defense of his WBC title opposite the ring, Vincent Astrolabia. And I have Junto winning that fight. I have Junto doing to Vincent Astrolabia what he already did to Maloney. I've got Junto knocking him out. Activity matters, folks. For you to be considered the best fighter in the world or one of the best fighters in the world, well, you need to be fighting, generally.
As much as I like to see Artur work, he's not as accomplished as the other fighters on the list. He really isn't. He hasn't been a champion at multiple weights the same way that they have. And he's not as active as most of them.
He's not. They fight more often. They give you more of a sense of continuity and consistency, whereas Artur, due to injury, there's just always a problem.
He's always out injured.
Back over to Bam. So one critique that I've seen levied against him post-fight is that Gallo was coming off a lengthy stint of inactivity, and that it's not just with Gallo, it is with some other fighters like Carlos Cuadras, who was in fact coming off of something like a year, 2 years of inactivity.
He was.
Bam took the Cuadras fight on short notice, which kind of evens it out for me, though all the same. It is true that Carlos was coming off inactivity, Gallo was coming off inactivity. What does it mean?
What is it, that Bam is the king of inactive and aging fighters? Is that what they're trying to say?
Beating inactive fighters?
Sounds like what they're trying to say.
What I'll say is, if Bam Rodriguez were campaigning at super flyweight, having not fought Sorung Visai or Gallo Estrada or Carlos Cuadras, what would the criticism be then? If he were in that division alongside those fighters, but he never fought them, then we'd be hearing about how he's avoiding the best and brightest fighters at the weight, the known fighters at the weight, because that's what they are.
How do you know?
Because that's what some people try to say about Naoya Inoue, that in his brief campaign at super flyweight, he never fought the Four Kings. He never fought the somebodies at the weight.
He tried.
They made a play to get Chocolatito in the ring, who was the man to beat at the time, but Chocolatito didn't like the money, so he decided to forego an Inoue fight for a Cuadras fight instead. But they still hold that against Inoue, looking for something negative to say, that during his brief campaign, super flyweight, he never fought those guys. Well, with Bam, it's the opposite. With Bam, he does fight those guys, but now they're too old and now they're too inactive. Factors that Bam cannot control. Factors that Bam can't do anything about.
But they are older fighters now than they used to be, and some of them are inactive. So what are you supposed to say?
I'd say that Bam's performances are not exclusively over older and inactive fighters, because look at what he did to Sonny Edwards, the fight before this one. And Sonny wasn't old. Sonny's not inactive. Sonny was an unbeaten champion, arguably the best at flyweight besides Bam, and look at what Bam did to him.
He knocked him out like he knocked out Gallo.
If this is intended to be one of those curb your enthusiasm moments, curb your enthusiasm comments, need I remind you that he beat an unbeaten fighter in his prime, and he stopped him the same way he stopped Gallo.
So I'm not gonna curb my enthusiasm. Bam is the genuine article, and he's doing what he's supposed to do.
That some of these guys are older and some are inactive, but he's doing what he's supposed to do. to these fighters under those circumstances where you have a Teofimo Lopez who's fighting an unheralded Steve Claggett, a fighter who's not on the level of a Juan Francisco Estrada, for example. Teofimo couldn't knock that guy out.
Couldn't stop him.
But Bam did stop Saul Rudavisai. He did stop Gallo Estrada. And he did stop Sonny Edwards. So just give the kid his flowers, because what would you be saying if he didn't fight them? If he didn't fight Gallo or Soar or Quadras, but he was campaigning at this weight, what would the story be then?
Then you'd say he's ducking those guys. Overly critical boxing fans that are really never happy. If Bam were campaigning at 115 pounds for 2 or 3 years, having never fought those fighters they like to call old and inactive, if he never fought them, then they'd say he's ducking them.
Gallo Estrada is said to have a rematch clause that he means to activate, so we might see a sequel. I don't really want one. I would prefer to see Bam move on from this and unify this division.
It's what he wants to do too.
Recently, Bam Rodriguez's name became attached to a potential Inui fight down the line. This is what Bam had to say. I know that people want to see that, but let's be real. Right now, it's a fantasy fight. I've got to work my way up. He's at 122 right now. I'm at 115. I've got business to handle in this weight class. I want the winner of Kazuto Ioka versus Fernando Martinez WBA and IBF unification match next week on Saturday or Sunday.
That would be ideal, and that would help to put to rest some of these critiques and criticisms that Bam's biggest wins are over older and inactive fighters. The winner of that fight is neither too old or inactive.
Winner of that fight, whoever it turns out to be, Kazuto or Fernando, they will be unified champion at this weight and exactly the kind of opponent that Bam needs. I firmly believe Bam can become this division's undisputed champion. To do it, he's got to fight the winner of that fight. You can't complain.
What else is he supposed to do? Who else is he supposed to fight?
Kosei Tanaka, too. 4-division, current reigning WBO Super Flyweight champion Kosei Tanaka. He's somebody that Bam should fight, that Bam could fight, en route to becoming the Super Flyweight division's undisputed champion. I don't think there's ever been an undisputed champion at this weight in the 4-belt era.
So let's hope that Bam gets the opportunity to do that without being bogged down by a pointless rematch.
As it pertains to the Top Rank show, the main event that we saw yesterday, Teofimo Lopez said he plans to move up to welterweight and attempt to become a 3-weight world champion following his win over Steve Claggett. Bob Arum said earlier this week that Teofimo versus Brian Norman Jr. could happen next for the WBO title.
Terrence's old WBO title, we know Terrence is done at 147. He's not coming back down. If and when the title goes vacant, Teo and Brian can fight for it.
That's what Bob Arum had to say about it. What Teofimo Lopez had to say about it. After the Steve Claggett fight, he called out WBA champion at this same weight, Isaac Cruz.
It's not a bad fight.
In spite of Teofimo looking a bit flat yesterday, I would still pick him to beat Isaac Cruz. Stylistically, he has the same edge over Isaac that he just had over Steve.
He's a boxer puncher / counter puncher, whereas Steve is a pressure guy. Isaac is a pressure guy.
Stylistically, it's the same fight against a smaller fighter. A smaller fighter who really hasn't done anything or beat anyone of note at 140 pounds. And no, Rolly doesn't count. Rolly was a 135-pounder who moved up in weight like Isaac is a 135-pounder who moved up in weight.
I think Teofimo beats Isaac.
I absolutely do. And even though he looked a bit flat with Steve Claggett, don't forget, Steve Claggett is a full-blown 140-pound fighter. Isaac is new to the weight.
Yeah, but Steve never beat anybody good.
Neither did Isaac, unless you think Rolly Romero is good. There's a difference between Rolly being known and Rolly being good.
He's known. He's definitely more known than Steve Claggett, but he ain't any good. He never was.
I think Teofimo beats him for the same reason he beat Steve Claggett yesterday. I would pick Teo to win that fight. The problem is Teo going to actually have it? Isaac is going to be fighting on the August show.
The undercard of Crawford versus Madrimov. Isaac is fighting Rayo. If he wins.
Does he go into negotiations for a Teofimo Lopez fight? Are they interested in unifying, or are they just going to run it back with Gervonta Davis? Because that's entirely possible. That an Isaac Cruz unification match could keep Teofimo Lopez at 140 a while longer, provided they actually make it. But are they going to make it? Are they going to try to? Are the Isaac Cruz people receptive to that fight?
Because if they're not, what Uncle Bob wants him to do is move up to 147, fight Brian Norman.
Brian Norman is not as known as Isaac Cruz, or Rolly Romero for that matter, but he's more of a threat to Teofimo than they are, because he's bigger than they are. A lot bigger than they are. This is a very big welterweight.
You know that he called out Teofimo Lopez. He said that he wants to fight him.
Bob wants to make it. You figure that if you're Team Lopez, you would prefer to stay at 140 a while longer and fight an Isaac Cruz.
But what if Isaac doesn't want to do it?
There are 2 other titles to collect at 140 pounds besides Isaac's. There is the WBC title that is now in the possession of Alberto Puello. He was elevated to full champion after Devin Haney decided he's going to take some time off.
He's supposed to be defending it against Sandor Martin. There is the IBF title. The IBF champion, newly crowned Liam Barro of Australia. Teofimo can see about doing a fight with him, though because those fighters, those champions, are on other sides of the street, promoted by other people, I don't get the sense that Bob and Top Rank want to get all wrapped up in some jackpot trying to make fights with them. That it would be easier. It would actually be easier for them to have Teofimo fight one of their guys at 147 instead of fighting somebody else's guy at 140.
Then what's the problem?
The problem is that Teofimo may not be as big and as strong at 147 as he is at 140. I mean, we already see he's not as big and strong at 140 as he used to be at 135. That the more he goes up,
The more they can take his power, take his punches. And if you go up again, the guys are going to be bigger, even more durable, and stronger. Perhaps stronger than Teofimo.
I've seen Brian Norman.
He's a big kid, and he's strong. He's a mid-range to inside combination puncher, and he's aggressive. So in that way, stylistically, Teofimo would have the edge, based on styles. But physically, he would be at a disadvantage.
He wouldn't have the edge.
The edge in height and length and strength, the edge in ring coverage and power. He wouldn't have the edge there.
Could be in trouble.
You know, Bob said I did well. He don't look too happy. Fuck it, I don't care. Like, I'm your only last star available, and that's it. You know, so you just gotta deal with it. You know what I mean?
Maybe Bob's way of dealing with it and dealing with you is to feed you to someone else. Someone who's not as troublesome. Someone who's not such a pain in the ass.
Maybe.
So what happens when a fighter perhaps has the right style for the job, but not the right size or physicality, strength? What could happen if you put Teofimo in the ring with Brian Norman? Well, Teo's gonna look for countering opportunities, and he may yet get them. He may land his punches, but if he can't get Brian's respect, he's gonna get bullied.
If you can't keep Brian honest, what stops him from busting through the front door and outsizing you, outfighting you?
That is a distinct possibility as Teofimo Lopez, who really isn't the biggest 140-pounder, ventures north of 140 to 147.
That's an inconvenient truth.
If you audit Teofimo's performance against Steve, appraise it, here you have a guy who stylistically gives you everything you want and everything you need. But you couldn't knock him out even though he's been knocked out before. What does that mean? That your power at this weight isn't what it was. You're not landing with enough authority, even though you are landing.
But he is too. Why do you think both of Teofimo's eyes are swollen?
Think he's got a shellfish allergy or something? That's Steve Claggett's handiwork. So swap out Steve Claggett for a bigger guy, a younger guy, who's never been knocked out, he's never lost.
Teofimo may want to stay at 140 a while longer, but Bob doesn't want him to. He wants to move him up. He wants him to fight Brian.
Slim pickings. Finally, in men's heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn on Anthony Joshua and Carl Froch's argument. I really disagree with Carl about AJ's resume and achievements. How he's changed the sport in this country is one thing, but his actual resume on paper I think is really good. If he beats Daniel Dubois to become a 3-time world champion, he's one fight away from undisputed. Froch was an amazing fighter, fought everybody, one of the greatest British fighters of all time. AJ still got another 5 fights in his career.
Maybe more.
So what Carl Froch has basically been trying to say is that ever since the Andy Ruiz fight, Anthony Joshua's wins haven't been that impressive or significant, and I don't agree with that.
People thought it was pretty significant that Francis Ngannou dropped Tyson Fury. Hell, some people actually thought that Francis won. So it's significant when Francis does well against Fury, but it's not significant when AJ knocks Francis out.
That's convenient.
And that was all anybody could talk about at that time, so that they could try to pull the rug from under Anthony Joshua when he makes it look easy. The same applies to Otto Wallin. It was significant when Otto Wallin did much better against Tyson Fury than people expected him to. Sliced his face all up. That's significant. But when AJ beats him and makes it look easy, oh, that's not significant. That's not solid.
For Carl to say that Anthony hasn't racked up a meaningful victory in a long time, I don't agree with that, and I don't agree with the appraisal of AJ's resume. AJ's resume is just as, if not more solid, than Carl's, with the difference being historical significance. Granted, that Carl was a very accomplished super middleweight, perhaps one of the best super middleweights the division has ever seen.
Perhaps.
But Carl isn't as accomplished as a super middleweight as Anthony Joshua is as a heavyweight. He's already been a 2-time heavyweight champion, which is a very short list of fighters. Now he's very close to becoming a 3-time heavyweight champion with another significant, solid win over Daniel Dubois.
I do think he's gonna win.
I do think he's going to knock him out. That Anthony Joshua's career has resulted in more memorable moments, not just for the heavyweight division, but the sport of boxing as a whole, than Carl's. And people are going to remember that, though. Let's not pretend that we're having this conversation on an even terrain, because we're not. A lot of the criticisms levied against Anthony Joshua are anything but even or fair.
They look for things to complain about. They look for things to nitpick.
So after he avenged the loss to Andy Ruiz, they were nitpicking about how he didn't knock him out. Then he goes in there, he knocks out Pulev. They don't really give him any credit for that.
Even though Pulev had never been knocked out.
He fights Francis Ngannou, who to a lot of people beat Tyson Fury. He beats him and makes it look easy. He stops him.
It's the same with Otto Wallin.
He beats him and makes it look easy. He stops him. So now that they can't criticize Anthony Joshua for being gun-shy, because that's what they were saying for a number of years, that he's gun-shy, afraid to commit to his punches, now he's committing, he's knocking people out, and they find something else to complain about.
Carl was asking what happened to the humble guy. Where's the humble guy? When he was the humble guy, you guys accused him of being fake.
You'd have to be very naive to think that this is really about appraising Anthony Joshua's resume so far. All I see is yet another guy in boxing who's looking for a way to criticize Anthony Joshua, because what they really tell themselves is,
Why shouldn't I criticize him?
he's not above criticism.
And I'm not saying that he is.
I'm saying that even if he goes in there and knocks out Daniel Dubois and becomes a 3-time heavyweight champion, you're going to find a way to disparage him anyway. No matter what he does, you're going to criticize him just for the sake of criticizing him, which is a bit different than having something to criticize him about.
You're just doing it to do it.
You decided a long time ago that you're not going to like this guy, and that's what it really is.
You're just rationalizing reasons to keep doing it and keep disparaging him.